The forgotten tunnel. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she pulled up to the decrepit remains of Eastbrook Psychiatric Hospital. The abandoned institution had always been surrounded by an air of mystery and urban legends, drawing in thrill-seekers and paranormal enthusiasts for decades. Tonight though, she wasn't here for ghost stories or cheap thrills. She was on the hunt for something much more substantial, proof of the disturbing rumors she'd discovered buried in the hospital's sordid history. Grabbing her backpack of equipment, cameras, audio recorders, EMF detectors, the works, Sarah took a deep breath and ventured inside through a gaping hole in the debris-strewn chain-link fence surrounding the property. The brutalist architecture of the main building complex loomed in the moonlight like a harbinger of madness, row after row of shattered windows resembling hollow obsidian eyes staring back at her. As Sarah slowly made her way through the looping corridors and communal rooms of the East Wing, the weight of decades of despair seemed to cling to every surface in a mantle of grime and decay. She ran her trembling fingers along the crumbling walls, imaging the cries of anguish that had echoed through these very halls years ago. So far the only signs of life were buzzing flies and rustling rodents scurrying through the refuse littering the floors. But Sarah knew better than to assume she was alone. Steeling her nerves, she continued onward towards the heart of the complex where her true destination lay, the tunnels. She followed a protruding maze of pipes snaking through shattered walls and crumbling doorways that eventually led to a thick steel door nearly rusted immobile. Sarah wedged her shoulder against the corroded metal, summoning all her strength to push through with an ear-splitting screech until just enough space opened up for her to slip inside. The stale subterranean draft that rushed out from the blackness beyond made her bones ache. Sarah quickly donned a respirator and switched on her headlamp before venturing forth into the abyss of the hospital's abandoned underground service tunnels and passages. For nearly an hour she trekked onwards, winding her way through narrow concrete corridors caked in dust and mold, following offshoots and side branches whenever her path diverged. The clouds of debris choking the air grew so thick at some points, Sarah had to activate a high-powered flashlight just to cut through the gloom for more than a few feet ahead. All the while, her audio recorders were capturing a fainter, more ominous phenomena emerging from the omnipresent dripping echoes and metallic groans of the crumbling tunnel network. A chorus of murmured whispers and unintelligible voices unlike anything she'd heard on previous explorations. Sarah tried to shake off the encroaching feeling of dread weighing on her, reminding herself that audio abnormalities could easily be chalked up to airflow and ambient noise distortions. But then she arrived at the eastmost terminus of the tunnel network, the source of the murmuring suddenly growing clear and viscerally unsettling. She stood at the threshold of a massive underground reservoir chamber, filled from floor to ceiling with water from decades of accumulated groundwater and pipe leakage. A faint light emanated from beneath the inky surface, dimly illuminating hundreds of humanoid shapes undulating throughout the submerged expanse. Sarah swallowed hard. Based on her research, this was the very same underground cistern that had provided water throughout the hospital's operation, fed by mineral springs that slowly trickled their way down through an entire network of adjoining tunnels and natural caverns spanning far beneath the foundation. But what she saw drifting amid the reservoir's shadowy depths was like something from a deranged nightmare. Scores of mutilated, disfigured human forms bobbed weightlessly just below the surface, their decaying eyes and mouths opened wide in silent, perpetual agonized screams. As Sarah swept her light across the nightmarish panorama, she began to make out the twisted framework of crude medical restraints and bindings still loosely anchoring the remains to rusted metal frames. Some of the demented figures craned their bloated necks and lolled their heads as if to watch the light move across them in a mockery of tormented curiosity. Dizzying waves of nausea gripped Sarah as the realization dawned on her, this was no dank water cistern. This was an unholy ossuary containing the remains of scores of patients who had disappeared from Eastbrook over the decades. Those deemed the most unruly, deranged, and undesirable cases disposed of in a mass watery grave, their tormented souls left to wander eternally in the subterranean depths. Fueled by sheer revulsion, Sarah took a few stumbling steps backwards before bumping into the tunnel wall behind her. her lungs heaving in ragged breaths. She watched in wide-eyed horror as the murmuring cries began swelling together into a droning chorus from the throats of the drifting remains. A droning cacophony of piteous croaks and gurgling moans that channeled the raw, scorned, restless agony of lives abruptly discarded like so much human waste through decades of institutional depravity. Their wails rose and fell in rhythm with their drifting, as if calling out through the watery grave to any who dared cast light upon their eternal unrest. Sarah slapped a hand over her mouth to stifle her own cries of panic, stumbling in retreat further into the tunnel until the water chamber fell out of sight behind a turn. Only then did she dare take gulping breaths, bracing herself against the slimy walls as full-body tremors racked her frame. No audio anomaly could spawn such visceral, primordial dread as whatever evil those tunnels concealed. In that moment, Sarah understood the truth surrounding Eastbrook's disturbing history, not mere overcrowding or underfunded patient care, but outright atrocity intentionally buried by those who sought to unleash the darkest recesses of the human psyche, those who dangerously indulged their basest curiosities about the reaches of madness, memory, and the soul itself. And as she stared back down the inky tunnel at the reservoir's haunting glow, Sarah knew that whatever torments claimed those mutilated souls would eventually rise to swallow any who dared delve too greedily into the well of secrets desperately sealed in this unholy place.